moving on with the show. So we're going to now move into the first session, which is the airline commercial session. And really excited that we've had the support and the presence of some really important airline guys here, and we've got a nice spread from across the continent. And the moderator for this session is somebody who's been a great friend of mine for many, many years and is now working with me. And I think we have, I heard her story at the outreach project that we did, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later this morning. But an amazing story, so take the time to speak with Agness, but please allow me to introduce Agness to the stage and the first panel.
Yesterday we were setting the tone with some of the industry gurus. We heard about the plan by the African countries to liberate the airs. We also heard from the guys that sell the airlines, the aircrafts, what aircrafts do we need to use? But today, ladies and gentlemen, and why we're all here, is to get certain people to make decisions and to tell us where they're going to be flying next. So please join me in inviting to the stage 4 great guys, 4 important people that need to tell us after today where they'll be going to. But before they do that, we want to hear what else do they want to hear from us, especially the airports. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Martin Gitonga, Kenya Airways. Ben Kakonda from Air Namibia. Richard Kyereh, Africa World Airlines. And finally, Ngala from ASKY. And ladies and gentlemen, note that we have a very good mix here. I have 2 private sector airlines and 2 national airlines. Gentlemen, good morning. And yesterday, some of our very industry gurus, I would say, spoke very extensively about this single African air transport market and what it is intended to do. So in a nutshell, liberate the airs. I'd like to hear from you, as airlines, as the final users of this initiative. How do you view this initiative? What do you think it is doing for your businesses? Is it a supporter, or is it something that we're not looking forward to?
ASKY, are you going?
I would like to go with ASKY, first of all. And then
Can you repeat the question?
ASKY.
Yes.
Could you repeat the question?
Okay, so yesterday we were talking about the single African air transport market, the SAATM. Yeah. And obviously the general idea is we liberate our skies, we liberate our markets. How does ASKY view that?
Okay.
Is it something that you are happy to have?
Thank you very much, Agness. Good morning to all. ASKY Airlines, first of all, is a private airlines, 100% private. We fly to 23 destinations within West and Central Africa region. We're based in Lomé, Togo. That's our principal hub. And we're starting flights out of West and Central Africa from the 15th of June with a new destination to Johannesburg. From a private airlines perspective, we support the single African air transport market at 100%. In fact, it's the president of Togo who was assigned by the African Union to lead this process. And I think some reports have already been submitted. It's very important that we move out of the space of our comfort zones and kick out this idea of protectionism and embrace the open sky, which every other person on every other continent in the globe is already putting into place. It has so many advantages. We have so many documents and analysis which have already been done to this regard. And so we want to encourage even the national carriers that are flag bearers that they shouldn't feel this whole idea of protecting. We should not open up, because as we open up our skies, we encourage competition, which is only beneficial to the public and to the consumer. Yeah. So I'm going to leave it at this stage for now.
Thank you. Thank you, Nowel. And Martin, a lot of meetings, a lot of documents done, a lot of agreeing, and generally almost 28 countries already on board. But we will talk and we will discuss and we'll agree in meetings. But when we get back to our offices, true or not true,
yes,
we seem to have a little bit of
different approach.
Pullback, especially from the national airlines.
Yes.
What is your take on the matter?
I think most of Africa, I think for us, we are one of the oldest airlines in Africa, and we believe and are contributing to the sustainable growth in Africa in terms of the air travel. We have, and I would like to take this opportunity actually to clear the air bill, because we have our concerns with SAATM and the whole approach.
Yeah.
What we don't want to do is give lip service to something that is very critical in terms of how we want to grow and develop Africa itself. So when we look at it, we have our concerns because the structures behind SAATM don't feel robust enough to be able to encourage the kind of connectivity we are all looking for. So just looking at it, we have had YD for the longest time, but the issue with YD has been where some countries have been able to adhere to even the bilaterals. We have, and Nairobi being one of the most open countries within Africa, actually we rank just slightly behind Johannesburg and Cairo in terms of foreign airlines operating to Kenya. So we see it as an opportunity that for us, we are quite open. But when we ask for the reciprocal approach, we as Kenya Airways have been one of the airlines that actually have suffered from that area, because we are unable to get the same reciprocal approach from even a bilateral, from what is already approved. So if you look at SAATM itself, yes, the idea is noble, but what's the robust structure behind SAATM that will ensure that I don't get stopped even when I have the approvals? Yeah. What's the structure that ensures, and we were happy, actually, I was very happy to hear about the dispute resolution part of SAATM, and the fact that this is catching up to the whole SAATM document, because this is critical for us. We do not want to just say yes, and then we honor it as it is evident as being one of the most open countries. We end up honoring it, but we do not end up getting the same in reverse. So we want to be able to actually be able to implement SAATM, but we want to see that this is something that can be implemented from a structural perspective.
Thank you. Ben, Martin says that it's welcome, and they've honored it to some extent. Namibia is a very small population, so you need this to go out there. But then, my question to you is, just like we're meeting here, airlines do have associations. Why are the airlines not talking about this? Because it is good. And what it will do is really just get you moving, getting the traffic that you need. Why are the airlines not talking to each other to actually get the SAATM a reality?
Yeah. Okay, thank you for the question. For Air Namibia, when it comes to SAATM, we welcome the idea. I think it's a brilliant idea. Air Namibia is one of the small countries with a small population, and we fly to international as well as within Africa. Yeah. We have been one of those countries that have been benefiting from the fee freedom. Most of our routes that we operate out of Namibia to other countries within Southern Africa, we start off with the fee freedom. Even when we started with going to Ghana the first time, we were flying from Windhoek, Johannesburg to Ghana. So we were benefiting from that. And for us, we look at it as being a very noble idea, very good idea for Africa. It's going to open up some areas for small airlines like ourselves. We will be able to fly to areas where we probably never thought of getting. Yes, there's an issue of bilateral
Yes.
that are still a problem. For example, when you want to fly to certain countries, it's a problem. It takes longer to get the approval. For example, if, without mentioning the name, we wanted to fly about 3 years ago to one of the countries. Until today, we could not fly there because the approval for us to get the operating license from that country is just not forthcoming. So we involved governments, we involved diplomats, but still the solution is not forthcoming. So for us, I think if all the countries sign up, it will help us to be able to grow. And also to be able to provide connectivity to Africa at large.
Thank you. Richard, you're a private company, and you may not have the luxury of running to Big Brother when you're in trouble. And Ben talks about bilaterals that are taking time, and really the whole idea of this initiative is to get rid of the bilaterals. What are you doing from your private perspective to actually give a push to the governments to make sure that this becomes a reality? We've been talking about, Yamoussoukro has been with us for a while. SAATM started becoming a reality starting, I think, last year, early last year.
2018.
And we're still here. What would you like to see as a private airline?
For us, from Africa World Airlines, we do support SAATM in full force, which is why even during the 30th session of the AU, when our president was going to endorse, we followed him, and to give our full backing, in principle. We believe in the potential that SAATM will bring to our African continent, a population of 1.3 billion, with creations of jobs, and ultimately fares will even be reduced, and connectivity, which is access to other markets, very key. And we believe strongly that at this point there is a large potential that now airlines have to position themselves. It is in this phase that we have started positioning ourselves to make sure that we tap from the potential that SAATM will bring. So if you realize recently, we have cooperated with a lot of carriers to make sure that we get the derived share. Most carriers do believe that the implementation of SAATM is going to open space for other big carriers to swallow up them from the market. Yes, it's true. This happened during the liberalization time in the US and the European market. But of course, you need to position yourself strongly. We believe that we have built a very strong network, and we do not fear competition because we have done our homework well. So we fully embrace SAATM.
Thank you. And I think we all know that competition is actually the way to go. You get afraid of it. I think somebody said something here yesterday about just having a good strategy.
Sure.
How are the other ones doing it and we're not doing it? I believe we can actually do it. And having tackled the bigger picture, the next one is obviously, on one hand, you deal with the governments, and that is where we're getting all of those facilitations. But on the other hand, and closer to home, you now talk about the airports. And I think what we've all seen now is that we have, Africa is a construction site. So they are giving us the infrastructure. But I would like to hear from you, and they are sitting in the audience, and they want to go back home believing that one of you will be announcing a route into their airports. What are they not doing?
Let me say this, that on the contrary, no airport has approached African Airlines, for me, never, no airport has approached us to open up routes. But again, we airlines struggle to even get permits in opening up into new destinations. I will say this for a fact, apart from Cape Town, which even that I think is because of an event that we were exposed to. That is why they approached us. But the other areas, even, let me go back home. We are seeking permits to operate to one of our domestic fields. And it's very difficult for airport company to even calibrate that field, publish it, for us to operate. And I mean, we think once we do that, there is opportunity for the whole economy and also for the market. So we do not force airport companies at times, but they do not approach us. Yes.
Okay. That's a very interesting.
I think I want to fully agree with Richard on this one. African airports, we have a long way to go in terms of seeing airlines as partners and not seeing us as more or less cash cow. For Kenya Airways, and I think, John, if you allow me, I'll plug this in. For Kenya Airways, we've planned our flight to Rome, Geneva as of 12th June, and looking at the kind of incentive package I've gotten from both airports in Switzerland and Italy, and then I compare that to what I've seen here in the last 2 days, we have a very long way to go. In fact, yesterday I was mildly amused to see one of the incentive packages that said there's a package available, but it excludes African Airlines. And that is in Africa, AviaDev. So the package is there, but it's not for African Airlines. Then I'm wondering, what's the approach here? So we have a very long way in terms of seeing airlines as a partner and working together, looking at the seat factor growth year on year and being able to incentivize this instead of taxing me at every junction. Looking at double taxation, looking at airports that in Malawi, the airport just closed down because the runway, every time I operated there, I had to relook at my tires. So there's a lot of high cost, and we saw a bit of that yesterday, high cost of operating in Africa, the cost on the aircraft itself. So we need to move, and I'm pleased to say that South Africa, and that's why our footprint in South Africa is quite significant. South African airports have really taken a lead on this, and we see that also in East Africa. But my biggest challenge here is West Africa, and Central Africa, of course, where we seem to be heavily lagging behind, and every time I land there, I basically have to land with a big check. So this is a concern.
Okay. And very appreciated, and probably you see, this is a very emotive topic, airports and airlines. And Martin, you give a very good example of Europe. We heard yesterday that Africa has 1.2 billion people. Only 10% of those are moving. So when we go to Europe, the picture is a little bit different. And because the picture is a little bit different, we probably come back and tend to understand, and the airport person in me is trying not to go so airport, but we understand that maybe they're getting that big check from you because you're not giving them enough passengers. Noah, what do you think about that?
Yes, before I get to this point, just to pick up on what Martin said earlier regarding the open sky and single African market. We know Africa has a population of over 1.2 billion.
Yeah.
And as it shows today, 85% of Africa traffic is dominated by the international carriers. As African carriers or regional carriers, we're fighting for 15%, which is really, really small and very unfortunate. We understand the idea of protecting your area. We understand the idea of the disparity of the economies, the different economies. Yeah. But shouldn't we consider Africa as one market, one domestic market, and then rather feed these international carriers that come with airlines and aircrafts that are different from us? For example, why would Emirates fly a 777 or a 380 from Dubai to Dakar for 9 hours, and then use that same aircraft to do a 45 or 1 hour trip between Dakar and Conakry because they have a fifth freedom traffic right, because they have to top up? When that aircraft type, the 777, is not meant for a 1 hour journey because we are either unable to feed them or because we don't have the traffic rights to enter these markets as fifth freedom markets. And in the same thing, if you look like the traffic between Accra and Abidjan, every carrier is within this routing. Why would Turkish Airline fly from over 8 to 7 hours from Istanbul and come to Abidjan and then do a 30 minutes flight to Accra just to top up. And at the same time, the regional carriers can also compete because they come with very huge wide-body aircraft. They're using these stations as top-up fifth freedom markets, and so they are virtually dumping fares. But these are principal routes for other regional carriers. So if we continue in this period of rather protecting our space and fighting among each other and giving space, this is how we continue to increase the market share of these international carriers, which we think we should open up and rather ask our authorities to rather not even, I think it's something we should consider in the single African, to exempt fifth freedom traffic for international carriers which are coming into Africa. And the airports, as you mentioned, also have a role to play in this because this traffic we see coming in comes through our airports. Depending on the carrier's approach or the vision or the strategy, if you're a point-to-point, yes, you pick up from an airport and you drop, and that's it. But if you're a seat freedom carrier where you've built a network which you want a traffic flow to happen, then the airport has a major role to play because very few passengers can make the difference between services offered in the airport and the airlines. So anything that happens, it falls back on the airlines. And when the airlines approach the airport, they want to work in a synergy in such a way that their passengers travel smoothly and have a memorable experience throughout their journey at the airports.
Maybe just allow me to add to what Nowel is pointing out in terms of protectionism. As I keep saying, for us, we operate on a different space. For us, it's really, Kenya is not at all protection-oriented. You look at it just statistically, the number of airlines that operate there. And there are two specific cases I would want to share to show this, actually, and the whole issue about having a robust SAATM. If you look at the now famous Intervista study, one of the countries they looked at was Kenya to South Africa. Actually, the traffic between the two grew by 60%. But if you look deeply or keenly at it, especially for us in Kenya, this traffic had potential to even double and even go over 100%. But the challenge was that whereas Kenya is very open to in terms of visa regulation for South Africans, they get their visa on arrival. The other way around, for a Kenyan, it used to be 2 weeks. Now it's gone down to maybe a week. But there's still a procedure that kind of prevents it. It's improving. I would say it's improving with time, but these kind of challenges where you're able to do it one way and there's no way to actually follow it up, be able to actually robustly develop this kind of traffic segment becomes a challenge. There's also the issue of trade within Africa. If you look at we're in South Africa, Nigeria is one of our biggest African countries also. They trade more with India and let's say Brazil than each other. So if you look at Nairobi to Morocco, where Royal Morocco is to, or is about to stop operating, the traffic between the two, as much as we've been very open to them, regulatory approach, we've even given fifth freedom, they stop in Chad. But the traffic between Nairobi and Casablanca is just not enough to be able to warrant the air connectivity. And you see that from the north coming to East Africa, they're being forced to still go through the Gulf or through Turkey. Not because we are not willing to offer the service, not because the regulatory environment is there, but simply Africans don't trade enough with each other. So we need to be able to develop a better, robust mechanism to handle this.
And thank you, Martin, that you actually bring that up because I think we speak about the challenges. We talk about what is not happening here. We talk about the coordination. Somebody has to start the discussion. And I think airports, airlines, the economy at large, we are all looking for the same thing. So really, I think the discussion now should be, what is it that we should start doing? What strategies? From an in-country perspective, from an inter-Africa perspective, what strategies should we be putting in place? What discussions should we be having from a trade perspective, tourism? You mentioned visa. You talk about trade, inter-Africa trade, the barriers. Shouldn't you be in the forefront of breaking those barriers? Because if we could get more than 10% of the 1.2 billion, African airlines going across the oceans will be a luxury because you will have your passengers within Africa.
Yeah.
What next?
Cooperation.
Sorry.
Maybe we can
Maybe
have
quickly.
Ben just...
Yeah, I think for me, I just wanted to say that the problem probably is not the airport as such. It's among the airlines. What are we doing as airlines to help each other? If I give a simple example, I'm not saying we should not compete. We should compete, and we should probably help each other. Instead of all of us flying into, let me just give a hypothetical example, into Luanda. All of us are going there. Or sometimes even we are originating from Joburg via a point to Luanda. I'm not saying we shouldn't compete, but we should also try to work together. Have cooperation among ourselves as African airlines, so that in the long run, we are not all going to fly to each country. I can fly to that country via cooperation with Kenya Airways or with AW. So by working together, we can also help each other and also build up the connectivity within Africa. If we are not working together as African airlines, these Gulf airlines will come, and they will fly to each and every capital city. And we are still going to sit and complain that we are not getting a fair share, but the problem is among ourselves. We are not competing. We are not helping each other through the cooperation of SPAs or code share, because some of us or some of the airlines will not have all the equipment needed to fly to each and every country, but we can help each other through the code share, through the SPA, and then I can also fly to Nairobi or fly to Uganda, but it's through working together. Okay. If we are not working together, we are going to end up having the same problem. Okay, the other problem that I have seen is that in the current situation, when African airlines get together to talk about, okay, let us cooperate on this route, the amount that we are giving each other for putting my passengers on you or my contribution towards that is higher than what you are giving to the Gulf Air or to the European carriers. So that is also killing ourselves.
So it's interesting to hear that the cancer is bigger than we thought. It's not just the airports supporting the other carriers, but it's also the African airlines not supporting each other. Richard, we're not supporting each other, but you see, I keep coming back to 1.2 million, 10%, 120. What are we doing to get the other people getting onto the flights? Because really, the issue here is we want the passenger. What are you doing to get me to fly where I would really drive? What are you doing to talk to the tourism, organizations to see what is it that we need to do together? So synergies.
Like Martin rightly said, you need to cooperate to operate. And that is exactly what we are doing. You cannot fly everywhere. So at the end of the day, you need to make sure standards are at par. Before an airline can cooperate with the other, your systems must talk. Yeah. And if your systems are not talking, you cannot do that. You should also align yourself to the standard. Are you IATA member? Are you IOSA certified in terms of safety? These are things that you have to heavily invest in. And the moment you do that, you bring yourself to that level that you can cooperate. For us in Africa World Airlines, we believe in Africa cooperation, and which is why we have a partner with South African Airways. They have reached 32 destinations and flying into 22 countries. for which Africa World Airlines, we have also invested in our rich West African countries. Now these two market serves become one for our flying passenger. If we had not bring ourselves to that standard, there was no way we were able to go into cooperate with them. Likewise, other carriers. So standardization is a key, and also investing, knowing the future of African aviation development and doing the right thing. So you need to, one, make sure you invest in the right equipment. Yes, we are operating in an environment whereby margins are very thin, and also, throughputs are not that high. So even your choice of equipment can make or make you, and that is, that is the fundamental. The main reason why most of African airlines have been chased off the runway is their choice of equipment. Because the markets are very tiny, so your equipment must be right. And that is why yesterday I was listening to our manufacturers, and yes, of course, invest in the right equipment and make sure your operational cost goes down. Because the airports and our various stakeholders, they are milking us. Cost alone to, for instance, in Ghana, flying from Ghana to Nigeria, taxes alone is one way is $70. Ghana Airport is charging passenger service charge $60 on one passenger. Aside that, I have what is called the G5, which is the safety tax. From Nigeria's side, is even almost double than that tax. So, for instance, if I'm to give you just a free ticket, you are not paying less than $150. So our margins have been shaved just by, all these taxes, and you need to make sure you invest in the right equipment, make sure operation cost goes down before we can even stimulate the market.
Sorry, Matthew. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to add a word on this because a template already exists in terms of how to enhance air connectivity and what's needed in their countries for them to be able to encourage more airlines. From the Gulf, where they work as a system, if you look at Cape Town Air Access team, where there's a consolidated approach by the different industry players. So yesterday we had the hotels talking about the image in Africa. You have the airports, you have the airlines. We need these to have, I keep saying the Cape Town Air Access example, where they are able to focus and work together to be able to encourage and attract airlines. And you can see that's being successful. Here in Cape Town, the Gulf Airlines, when you fly Turkish, you see the whole export promotion, tourism pamphlets within the aircraft. So they are able to work, and even, especially with Africa, where there is need for a lot of political support for this to be a success, to be able to look at the regulatory environment, visa environment, why people need to travel between the two. So there has to be that for each and every country. Yeah. There has to be that approach where the airlines partner with airports, partner with the export tourism and tourism bodies to be able to push this agenda.
Thank you, Martin. Nowel, a very good point there. And Cape Town Air Access is by far one of the best integrated approaches that we have seen. And what is true is it's working. They started with a plan to have 4 new carriers. They're talking more than double. Nowel, are you speaking to your investment promoting people in Togo? Are you speaking to your tourism people? Are you talking to each other, or you're all basically operating in parallels? And I still want to hear, you see, it's good to hear that you want this, that. What are you as an airline, you're part of the equation, doing to actually make sure that it happens?
Yes, we are. We are seriously talking not only in Togo, but around the world, and particularly in Africa. We believe, for example, ASKY, as a private airline, has a total of about 42 commercial agreements with other airlines around the world. These range from code shares to SPAs and interline. I have an interline and SPA with Kenya Airways. We're working on code share. With Africa World, we have an interline and SPA. I think we're going to approach Ben for the same purpose, because we think that the kind of services we should be offering in Africa, especially to improve intra-African connectivity, which is still lacking behind, is more or less complementary services. If ASKY flies in the morning, Kenya Airways should fly in the afternoon to give the population an opportunity to choose the timings that are perfect for them to fly. This is how we improve connectivity through cooperation. We are speaking to our authorities to really bring down the barriers in terms of visas. As Africans, we should be able to consider Africa as a domestic market and travel freely into any African country. There's no reason why a Senegalese, a Togolese, or a Ghanaian wanting to go into Cameroon needs to send a visa application 14 days ahead of time, and then before it's approved in Yaoundé, and then sent back to you before you board an aircraft when you're an African. There are a lot of other African countries in West Africa that are showing a good example, like Benin and Accra, visa on arrival, even though it's expensive. They should look at bringing down the cost. These are the areas and the elements where we are pushing with the authorities and our colleagues and our friends to make sure that we cooperate, we work together to improve connectivity. And if we don't bring down these barriers, we will continue to live in our own islands and not serve the public properly.
Richard, Airlines, you have your agreements.
Yeah.
You are making sure that the facilitation is actually sound, barriers to visa and everything. But what I really want to hear is, are you talking to the people that will help create the demand on your product?
Correct. For us, our government is a listening government.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a listening government. We have actually implemented visa on arrival, I think, for the past 2 to 3 years, freely for all Africans. Just that, like Nowel said, the cost involved is a little higher, which, again, we are still in discussion with authorities to ensure that the cost of visa arrival becomes, very minimal, for all. And that also stimulates. Again, if you look at the investment that our government has done recently in terms of our airport expansion, coming up with Terminal 3, the moment Terminal 3 became operationalized, the volume of our connecting traffic moved up to 400%. And that makes connections very seamless for passengers within the sub-region. And that is even an indication that when the right investments are being made, you get the needed returns. So that is very key. We also have a ministerial committee between the aviation and tourism, talking and working hand in hand to make sure that we, again, can also stimulate traffic on that end. So there is a working committee doing this, and also when the right things are being implemented, we see the derived results.
Thank you.
Just to add to what Richard said, one thing that I think we as airlines as well as airport should work together is to try and push for easy access to these visas. Because I can tell you that for us, especially in Nigeria and Ghana, we are losing a lot of passengers just because one have to send his passport to Nigeria in order to get a visa. A Ghanaian sends his passport to Nigeria. The possibility of that visa of that passport getting lost is very high. So I think if we can probably try to push not only SAATM, but also the visa to be made easy. Visa on arrival to all Africans, I think it will help us all. Because some people are just transiting, and he comes there and the flight is delayed, for example. He cannot enter the country, he has to sleep in the airport. And some airport, there's no hotels, so he sleep in the terminal. So we need to work towards also helping people to get their visa much easier.
Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. I think we basically seem to be doing something right. what I've seemed to hear here is that the gentlemen don't seem to have problems with the airports. So airports, you do actually expect to go away with a few deals in the bag. But
Just a quick comment from Raphael from IATA.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, thank you very much. Congratulations, gentlemen, for being so eloquent on the subject, and thanks to the moderator. Now, a couple of things I just wanted to bring to the fore. First and foremost, Kenya Airways talked about the issue of reciprocal traffic rights, which is impacting on which is giving them concerns about SAATM. You know, reciprocal traffic rights is based on the bilaterals that you have signed already. Yep. So if you have signed bilaterals today and you are unable to exercise those bilaterals, this is something that you need to deal with through your diplomatic channels, foreign affairs, to try and unlock. And under SAATM, once you sign the memorandum of implementation, you are committed, because there is a YD compliant BASA template which you are supposed to sign with all the other African countries. That makes it easier for you now to be able to access the route network. Besides, I would want that as operators, just let us share your concerns with IATA, with AFRA, so that we can take them up with AFCAC and with the African Union, so that they are properly addressed. That way, we would all be supporting to push SAATM. I bet you will all be very happy once SAATM is fully enforced, and none of you would have concerns on that. Now, to the point that Air Namibia mentioned about it's become a problem. You are unable to fly also between some city pairs as a result of bilateral restrictions. Again, it's the same as the Kenya Airways situation. But we need to work together, and we need to use diplomatic channels. If you've been trying 3 years to try and access a particular market and you have not been able to do so, my advice will be, if you have plans, and that's why you need to have short, medium, and long-term plans. If in your medium to long-term plans, you want to access a market which currently your country has no bilateral air services agreements with, you need to start the process much earlier. Because these are diplomatic negotiations between countries. Yeah. So if you wait until when you are ready to fly, you have taken delivery of aircraft and you don't want to fly, and they start the negotiations, it could take a long time. And probably that is why you've been trying 3 years to try and access a market, and it's just not working, because the process of negotiation might take much longer than you actually anticipate. Now, on the issues of visa, let's face it, the visas go beyond our control as operators. These are country-to-country decisions. And the fact that your country is able to issue visas on arrival or issue visas within a week is not a must that the other country you're flying to must do the same. It is good if they can do the same. It's much better, it's much more efficient for us. But don't forget, just as how you're carrying passengers to the other side, which have access to this efficiency, the same way when you are coming back from the other side, that inefficiency affects not just you, but all the other operators from that side. So ultimately, let us try and see how we can work around some of the difficulties whilst engaging with our governments to try and get them to help us unlock the difficulties and make the operating environment much more efficient for us. But my final point, the 4 of you sitting there, which of you have commercial corporations among yourselves? And if not, why?
Thank you, Raphael.
Sorry, I wanted to quickly respond. Sorry.
Can I just speak on one of...
Let's just button go first and then...
Maybe, Raphael, for me, the bigger thing here is I do not want SAATM to be another paperweight. So I want to be practical and very clear in the approach. Where you already have something approved, I'm not talking about where you want the negotiation to take place. I'm talking about something that's in black and white approved. But when you apply for the schedule gets rejected. There are some countries that can't even do an aircraft equipment change, which is in the bilaterals. So the practicalities of SAATM in Africa, there has to be a clear dispute resolution mechanism to be able to effectively allow us as airlines to take advantage of this. But if you tell me go back to the government, different governments have different approaches. Kenya honors the documents it signs. We do not get the same. So that has to be put in this forum, and we find either through SAATM AU a way to address this. Yeah. In terms of partnerships for Kenya Airways, most of my partnerships are just purely from a commercial perspective, and I do work with the airlines here, apart from my colleague in Africa World Airlines, but that will be resolved also.
And I'll explain why.
That will be resolved also. And I do believe in easing access, but these are commercial agreements. That's a different approach. But where we're talking about opening up Africa, we have to be very practical, especially for the commercial team here. I have to be able to use what has been allocated to me.
Thank you, Martin. And I think we are going to have some agreements between KQ and Africa World Airlines. And we hear you. I think the whole idea is talking. And who are we talking to? We should be talking to the right people, not just complaining in our corners. Nowel, you wanted to say something?
I'd like to pick on what Raphael said on the first point regarding the MOUs and everything. We are private airlines, but we are designated by the country, the Republic of Togo, as the national carrier so that it helps them to negotiate bilaterals and which we benefit from. Togo has a full, not only an MOU, but a full BASA, which has been signed with most of the countries in Africa. And like you said, to express our needs, we want AFCA, we want AFRA, we want IATA to ask the authorities of Senegal why ASKY cannot have traffic rights to fly from Dakar to Banjul, from Dakar to Nouakchott, from Dakar to Cape Verde. It took ASKY 3 years since 2010 to have the traffic rights to fly into Dakar. And it's 9 years now, we've been requesting for fifth freedom traffic rights. It's impossible. We want these institutions to intervene and support us at this level. And the same thing with Burkina Faso. Fifth freedom traffic rights between Burkina Faso and Dakar, between Burkina Faso and, in fact, all the countries within the West African states, because we complain every day about not serving Africa completely. We complain about the intra-African connectivity, which is a problem, but we have a serious barrier, which is our authorities and our governments not willing to understand and not willing to provide the support which is necessary to help airlines expand and serve the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nowel. And I think that basically tells us that the SAATM is a must-do, and it must be done very seamlessly. We're all willing. We just need to have the right discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the good gentlemen here for a good discussion. Thank you.
Wow. I think the quote that I liked, there was lots in there, lots and lots and lots. We need to cooperate to operate. I remember Raphael saying at a conference we went to last year, it's a matter of survival. We need to be, we're stronger together, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here, is the fact that you've just put the faith to actually be here and have those conversations and talk about that collaboration is testament to that initiative. And it's where we can all learn. But as you saw the challenge that Knowles had with ASKY, with traffic rights, what we want to do with SAATM is take that out of the question. It doesn't then have to be that. If the demand is there, the beneficiaries will be the countries at the end of the road. So, of course, to help with this, we actually ran a training course the day before AviaDev started, so on Wednesday, which was aimed at tourism authorities, airports, and other stakeholders. And the idea being that it would provide the skills required to improve the quality of the meetings that happen and the interactions here between the airlines and the airports. The airports would get an appreciation of what the airlines are actually looking for in those 20-minute meetings and tailor their approach accordingly. Of course, that's a virtuous circle because that means there are more routes and then we're all more connected and we drive down the price. And that's exactly what we are existing for here. So I do want to thank the guys that did the training course. My incredible colleague, Kyereh, put it all together. He runs our AviaDev Europe event. I'm sure you've all seen him. He's wearing my tie from last year. So, you know, we'll have to keep that going as well as a bit of a tradition. Also, Sabine Rehm from Intervistas Consulting, who's been to every AviaDev as well. And her company were the company behind the report that was brought in by IATA in 2013, and my two colleagues from Midas as well, John and Becca, who are sat right in front of me. I can see them just about from the lights. Hopefully I'm not blinding anyone, by the way, as well, from up here, so let's hope not. So before we just get on with the second thing, the next session, we did actually do, you may have seen, last night at Hazendal, there were two beautiful model aircraft on the piano, and there was a business card drop, and we have the winners. So the ATR 72 is going to Hazel Van Ziel from Q. So Mark and Stefan are going to come to the stage and present that over. So very well done to Hazel. And the 42 was won by Alexander Herring. So please join us on the stage. We'll get a photograph and present the models. No airlines, Mark. You didn't. The airlines didn't win. You can prove it's not rigged, you see. Hazel, come forward. Is Alexander in the room? Oh, he's coming. Here he is. I hope so. He's on the next panel, so.